Now that you've learned how to show a list of records and also just one record, let's learn how to delete a record. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go back to our index controller for our students. There's our student controller, and here's our index CSHTML view. And if you notice, inside of that CSHTML view for index for students, there's a controller called, or an action method called delete. And if you click on the word delete, it's going to go ahead and call the delete action method in the student controller. Remember, once again, if you don't specify the controller on the action link, then it will look to see what controller folder it's currently in. And this is the index view that's in the student view folder, meaning it's working with the student controller. So this would say go to the delete action method in the student controller. So let's go to the oh, and by the way, before we go there, notice that we pass once again the parameter of student ID, and that's the student ID that we're currently looking at within the model. So let's go over to our student controller and let's write an action method for deleting. So here's our new action method in the student controller. It's called delete. It receives one parameter called ID, which may or may not have a value. That's why we say that it's nullable. If they did enter a value, then we're going to use the db variable. And if you remember earlier in this controller, we created a variable db of type hardknockscontext, which is the db context object, which refers back to our web config, which refers to our database. So we say db or dbObject.attribute database dot execute SQL command. Now this method is different from the SQL query. The SQL query method is used to go and return data, whereas anytime you do a delete, update, or insert, you'll be using execute SQL command. And then we just say delete from student where the student ID is equal to whatever parameter we passed it. Also, be aware that the execute SQL command returns an integer value, which is the number of records that it was successfully worked on or that it completed. So you could trap that if you want to. And then afterwards, when we're done with that, we're just going to go back to the index of student. So let's go ahead and save that. There's no view associated with this. So we'll go back to our main index controller, our main index view for the project, which is our home controller, and it will display the landing page. And then we'll click on our view students link, which that will show us all of our students in the database. And then we can click on details to see one, go back to the list, and let's say that Betty Sue Jamboree just is wrong. She doesn't need to be there. We'll click on delete, and Betty Sue is gone. And then notice it brought us right back to the index view for the student controller. And that's how you do a delete using Microsoft Visual Studio. So once again, just a quick review. All you have to do is use the database object, the database attribute, execute SQL command, and delete.